Hello everybody, John from Gaming in the Wild here, and it's February already. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I feel like this year just started, but a new month means a new indie game releases video, and I have to say, this month's indie game guide is a really bizarre mixed bag. I think I've rarely seen such an unusual crop in the 2+ years I've been making these videos. We've got a first-person puzzle game where you play an alien virus awoken by asteroid mining. We've got a game where you play as a chef who only cooks for the wild animals in the forest around their cabin, and we've got the game that the Little Nightmares development crew left their own franchise to make because Little Nightmares wasn't dark and twisted enough, so something for everyone I hope. And if you're an indie game fan who enjoys this channel, then please do check out my Patreon. You get behind the scenes stuff from me, a Discord invite, and a free game code for a hand-picked indie that I want to give to you. That offer is as good for as long as the codes last, so head over to patreon.com/gaminginthewild to hop in and get yours. And I also want to quickly thank the channel sponsor Playtracker. Playtracker is a site that will let you track your playtime and trophies across all the platforms that you play on. I'm always looking for my hour count on games that I've been playing, but that info is spread out across the PS5, Steam, and Xbox apps, and Playtracker has proven really useful in drawing all of that info into one place. For example, I can see at a glance that I played 16 hours of Cairn this month on Steam. I played 1 hour of Cassette Boy, which reminds me, I need to get back to that game. It's actually really cool. I played 8 hours of Cauldron, a really neat, underrated little pixel indie from last year that's like a lightweight tactics, incremental auto battler thing. And on PlayStation, I hit 77 hours of Arc Raiders, which brings it into my top 10 most PlayStation games ever, just below Fallout 4. So I have found referring to Playtracker pretty often very useful for me, and if you like nerding out on your own play stats and keeping track of your trophy progress across platforms, then you can sign up for Playtracker for free using the link in the description to let Playtracker know that you came from this channel. I've also put a link to my Playtracker profile down there if you want to add me as your first Playtracker friend. So thanks very much to Playtracker for sponsoring the channel. I really appreciate it, and I like the tool as well. And with that, let's get into it and look at the top indie games coming out in February of 2026. The first game that I have for you is out already. It came out on the 2nd of the month, and it is called Tearscape, developed by Nerds Take Over. It's a Game Boy style Zelda-like, and this genre seems to be having a mini renaissance at the minute, with the long-awaited, recently postponed Mina the Hollower leading the charge. But if you're still waiting for that game with bated breath, then Tearscape might help you scratch that itch. Now, I should say that I have no way of knowing if it's Tearscape, like a landscape of tears, or the rather more violent-sounding Tearscape. So I guess this game is either very brutal or very sad. I think I would prefer sad, so I'm going to stick with Tearscape, but let me know which one you think it is in the comments. And I think this game looks really good. It seems to really understand the assignment of being a Zelda-like, with sword and spell combat, puzzles to open ways forward, inventory management, and upgrades with nicely written RPG item descriptions. It has a sprawling world map to explore, and it's out on PC, Mac, and Linux. There is a demo on Steam if you would like to try it out. That's Tearscape, or Tearscape. On the 3rd of the month, we got Sector Zero. It's a pretty intriguing looking game with a very cool art style. It's a physics-based, dark sci-fi adventure set in a space mine on a far-flung asteroid. The mining activity has awoken an alien hive mind, and you're going to be exploring the maze-like mine, avoiding traps, operating machinery, and solving puzzles. But interestingly, in Sector Zero, you don't play as the last surviving miner or the beleaguered administrator of an automated facility trying to save the place. You actually play as part of the hive mind that's been awakened. So I think that this game joins the very small list of games where you play as the monster rather than the hero. Because it's a short game, the trailer doesn't give much more than that away, but I think it's probably safe to assume that we're probably sabotaging this facility to some degree. It's an intriguing little game for sure, and you can pick it up now on Steam for only $4. Sounds like it's worth a punt to me. That's Sector Zero. Now, I'm a sucker for deck-based games. I have scores of hours in games like Slay the Spire and Monster Train, and a frankly terrifying hour count in Balatro at this point. But the one thing that most deck builders have in common is fairly simple visuals, but Lever's Rift is a new roguelike deck builder that defies that formula. It has very, very lush visual presentation, and the first words on its Steam page are that it's more than a deck builder. You can see that immediately in the game's lush sci-fi world, and it really does look like you can move around the world freely before entering combat, so maybe it has a bit of that that JRPG overworld vibe going. The card combat looks interesting and involved as well. The game promises 25 arenas across multiple biomes, over 50 enemy types, and hundreds of cards with different synergies to build up, as well as a story involving characters like the Stranger and the Mother, which is pretty mysterious stuff. The game's been through early access and it's coming out of the other side of it now with a 1.0 release on February 4th, and I'll be fascinated to see where the reviews come down on this one because it's something pretty unusual. It's shaking up the deck builder. That's Lever's Rift. On the 5th, we have another one for retro game fans. It's a game called Lovish. It's an action platformer made in the 8-bit style, and I think this one will tickle the nostalgia of anyone who grew up playing on the NES, the Master System, or the Game Boy Advance. It's made by Labs Works out in Japan, but it is getting an English translation, and all of the action in this game happens screen by screen. There's no scrolling, so each room that you enter is like a little puzzle to solve, and between each room you will get a short event scene, and there are over 150 event scenes in the game that trigger randomly and start to fill in the blanks of the story. The trailer does show your little blue character at the start saying that not only does he want to rescue the princess, but that he wants to keep her all to himself. It's a pretty creepy sentiment, so don't be surprised if the princess turns out to be the final boss as she escapes not only from this castle but from her would-be rescuer. It's coming to all the consoles and PC, and I think this is the kind of game that will feel very at home on the Switch. That's Lovish. Also on the 5th, we're getting Hermit and Pig, the first of my most hype picks of the month. I've talked about Hermit and Pig a lot in other videos, so I won't linger on it too long here, but it's a pixel art RPG in which you play as the titular hermit and his pig companion. It has a charming story in which the grouchy hermit is drawn away from his normal life for foraging for mushrooms and drafted to help the local community from a monster invasion. It has an interesting turn-based combat system with key inputs, so you have to punch things in to pull off your attacks, and it's a game that is just packed with charm to the brim. This is one of those games where you can just tell that it was made with a lot of love. I played it at the last Next Fest and it was a big hit with me. It also has an 88 Metascore on release day. That's a pretty mighty score for a little indie game, so let's see if that score holds across the next couple of weeks. It's only PC and Mac for now, and there is a demo on Steam if you want to give it a try. That's Hermit and Pig. Next up we have Dead Pets, a punk rock slice of life sim. Bit of a mouthful of a title, but in this game you play as a member of the punk band Dead Pets, who are, according to the game's text, looking for their big break. Very punk of them. You have to navigate life stuff like friends, lovers, landlords and so forth, and then play a rhythm game to do well at band practice. There are also mini-games for diner shifts, cooking and watering your plants, all of which makes this an extremely wholesome version of punk. I guess it's more like a post-millennial pop-punk simulator. It doesn't say whether there are mini-games for bricking windows or scoring speed or finding a new squat or administering stick and poke tattoos, but who knows, right? Punk rock quibbles aside, the game does look super fun. It flicks between hand-drawn visual novel sections and chibi top-down exploration parts, and it has an original soundtrack to play along to at practice. It's Steam only for now, and it's out on the 6th. That is Dead Pets, a punk rock slice of life sim. On the 6th also, we get Creature Kitchen, and this game's trailer won me over within 20 seconds of watching it. It's a first-person game in which you arrive at a creepy, dusty old cabin in the middle of the woods, only to find out that you are not alone. There are animals here too, including a raccoon that hangs out on the patio, frogs in the marsh, and birds hanging around doing bird things. The only thing for it, of course, is to introduce yourself to the neighbours in the classic way, and that is to start cooking for them. So it turns out that Creature Kitchen is in fact a semi-creepy, semi-cozy cooking puzzle, exploration, creature collector game all rolled into one. I think this is just a very cool idea. It reminds me of Paradise Marsh, a weird little underrated indie game from a few years ago where you catch bugs and then converse with the night sky. I'm very much here for this kind of weird little indie experiment, and I can't wait to become a vigilante animal butler when Creature Kitchen lands on Steam on the 6th of the month. On the 10th, we get Mewgenics, and you may have heard of this one already. It's a cat breeding turn-based battler, and it's not just about the battling because you have to breed your kitties down the generations, combining and mutating their abilities in the process, and then take them into turn-based battles. That's when you will find out if the cat army that you've assembled can get the job done. The game promises over 1,000 different cat abilities, which leads to a near infinite amount of synergies and permutations, and you will need to master a lot of them to progress through this game's many puzzle-adjacent combat challenges. This one was partially designed by Edmund Macmillan, the maker of The Binding of Isaac and half of Team Meat, who made Super Meat Boy. And I will say that it has a fairly retro, puerile South Park style of humour going on, which I think will go a long way towards telling you if you're going to like this game or not. Either way, it's been a long time in development and I will watch the reviews with interest. That's Mewgenics, out on Steam, including being deck verified on the 10th. And I said at the top that this month's games are a super weird little bunch, and that trend continues with BLEMO. The trailer for this one really caught my eye. You play as a penguin in the jungle who must cross a giant pit built by a, quote, evil, snazzy, hat-wearing monkey, unquote. This game purports to be only 5 minutes long, so any kind of further information on it is kind of scant on the Steam page, but I will read you the developer description. They say it's a super short, casual, interactive story where you can talk to NPCs, walk across the tiny map, and try and solve our secret puzzle. We wanted to try and create a tiny living world, so let us know how we did. Soak in the 5 minutes of gameplay for as long as you like, end quote. I don't know if this game really is 5 minutes long or if there's some kind of fake out going on, because the trailer has some pretty high production values and it is actually 2 minutes in itself, so how can the game only be 5 minutes long? The good news is that BLEMO is going to be free on Steam and it drops on the 12th of this month, and I've actually put a note on my calendar to remind me because this game has made me so curious. I have no idea what it is and I'm dying to find out. That's BLEMO. On the 12th of the month, we get the In the Dark DLC for Lil Gator Game. Now, Lil Gator Game was an extremely charming little game that was kind of built on the foundation laid by the seminal A Short Hike, one of my favourite indie games of all time. It mixed the idea of a mini open world of A Short Hike with the exploration style of Breath of the Wild of all things, so it's quite ambitious even though it's small in scope, and I think that's probably why we're getting a DLC. This game was too good to leave it at just a couple of hours long, so we're getting a whole extra chunk of game, and I'm really pleased about it. If you didn't play Little Gator Game, it's the tale of a little gator who is on summer vacation and decides to build a giant LARP-style game across an entire holiday island. It has themes of childhood, coming of age, and the value of play, and it was a really heartwarming game. The In the Dark DLC literally doubles the size of the base game, so it's really more like a sequel in disguise, and it sees the gator take to the cave system below the island with caverns, minecarts, updrafts to navigate, new quests and side quests, new friends to make and try and recruit. I found this game to be a comfort game bullseye, and if you haven't played the base game, then do play it before this DLC drops. I'm really looking forward to it. It's out on the 12th of February on all formats. That's Lil Gator Game In the Dark. On the 13th, we get REANIMAL, a brand new game from Tarsier Studios, the makers of Little Nightmares 1 and 2. The studio actually left behind their vastly successful franchise to explore a new, darker direction, as if Little Nightmares wasn't dark enough, and REANIMAL is the result. I played the demo of this one at Next Fest and I was incredibly taken with its moody, cinematic intro. You wake on a speedboat in a dark sea and you drive into the mist, where you discover a child's body floating in the water. You pull them out and they kind of launch themselves at you with a kind of feral survival instinct, but it turns out that it's your kid sister, and the two of you are trapped in a nightmarish scenario where something on the island you call home has gone very, very wrong, and it seems like you will be taking the boat from place to place with the main story to pursue, but the game promises lots of secrets and digressions along the way where you can hop out of the boat to explore ruined factories and buildings and try and get to the bottom of what's going on. There are also some terrifying creatures lurking in the dark that you have to stay one step ahead of. This is a very, very cool looking game. It's coming to Switch 2, Xbox Series, PlayStation and Steam. It's dropping on the 13th. That's REANIMAL. And mind the tonal whiplash as we handbrake turn away from REANIMAL and into this next game, because on the 17th of February we get the very, very wholesome Placid Plastic Deck, A Quiet Quest. In this game you play as a girl called Zoe who sets out to try and win a local card tournament, and this is a very fresh looking game. It has an Earthbound-esque colour palette and a look to it with gorgeous pixel art, and the card game itself looks partially inspired by Inscription of all things, especially the way that the cards kind of attack each other physically as you play. I really like the card art in this game as well, which matters a lot. I'm always kind of surprised by how many deck builders kind of flub one of the main parts of the assignment, which is making the cards attractive and cool and something that you want to collect and play with more. No such worries here, the cards look really cool, and if you want to see more of what this game is all about, there is a demo of it available on Steam now. I'm looking forward to mining into it and finding out what kind of card game we're talking about here. That's Placid Plastic Deck, A Quiet Quest, coming to PC on February 17th. And now we've reached the biggest day of the month. On the 19th of February, we're getting 4 interesting indie games dropping all on one day. So it's like a mini Royal Rumble. You have to let me know in the comments which of the next 4 games you'll be picking up on the 19th of the month. Taking them alphabetically one at a time, the first is Death Howl, and you may have seen this game cross your feeds in December because it released on Steam in that busy pre-Christmas dead zone for games media. I raised an eyebrow at that release window, but it did still manage a Metacritic 82 from 22 reviews, and hopefully this February console release will see it getting more flowers, because Death Howl is a game that definitely deserves your attention. It has a very distinctive vibe. It's earthy and witchy and kind of shamanistic. It's the tale of a mother who loses her baby and descends into the underworld to try and recover its soul. The underworld itself is a surreal, bleak and beautiful place with a colour palette of moss and eggshell and bone, and your magic takes the form of cards in this game that you will use in battle, and there is a crafting element to this where you'll have to collect resources and craft new cards for new spells, and you're going to need all of them because the turn-based combat in this game is hard as nails, maybe to a fault in fact, but even so there just isn't anything else quite like this game. It's got this grim quietude and this kind of mystic feeling to it. I can't wait to play more of it, and on the 19th you can play it anywhere because in addition to that December Steam release, it will now be hitting PS5, Xbox Series and Switch. See if you fall under its spell. That's Death Howl. As well as interesting pixel retro games, it's also been a good year already for 3D platformers. After the impressive, highly mobile Big Hops in January, we're now getting another expressive 3D platformer in February in the shape of Demon Tides. It's a colourful platform adventure that's out on the 19th, and this game really does have a bit of juice to it, from the oceanic overworld that you can streak across at high speed, to the wall running, double jumping, ground pounding action. It really does lean into the expressivity side of things. And when I say expressive 3D platforming, I mean the aim of the developer seems to be to arm the player with a rich toolkit of moves that they can string together creatively, rather than executing a single solution to a section of gameplay. It also has some nice quality of life considerations woven into it, like being able to set your own checkpoints. And there's plenty of stuff to do in the world itself, with NPCs, costumes to collect, secrets and so forth, and the previews have been red hot on this one, with some journalists saying it could be a new high for the genre. That's some pretty crazy praise when the 3D platformer genre also includes gems like Mario Odyssey. It's a lofty goal to try and top that, so let's see if this game can manage it when Demon Tides bounds onto Steam on February 19th. The third game coming out on the 19th is Love Eternal, another game that seems to go to some pretty dark places. It's hitting Steam only for now, and this is a game that seems to explore obsession as we play a girl who's been imprisoned forever by a lonely, forsaken god. They have locked the girl up in a castle made of memories that you as the player will try to help her escape. And it's interesting that the gameplay of this game and the somber vibe should be so at odds, because that narrative setup might make you think that it's going to be some kind of point-and-click adventure, but it's actually a precision platformer with some quite fast-flowing action, like VVV meets Celeste. And I have to say that the gift screens on the Steam page of this one are absolutely brutal, with you having to flip gravity in mid-air, avoiding spike traps and that kind of thing. So this is definitely one for people with saintly patience and a taste for a challenge. I have neither of those things, so maybe I'll be passing on it myself, but it's the kind of game that I might want to watch a stream of, because the art style and the general feel of this one suggests that there's something special lurking under the surface. It's actually coming to all of the consoles as well as Steam, so you can play this one anywhere when it releases on the 19th. That's Love Eternal. And then the last of the 4 games coming out on the 19th is called Seafrog. It's an action platformer with a very different feel to the last game. It's a colourful take on 2.5D skating. There are a variety of maritime themed levels for you to trick, flip and power slide your way through, and an interesting power-up system with 24 mod chips that you can combine in different configurations. This will let you adapt your moveset and tweak the level of challenge that the game has to offer. There is also some meat on the bone here if you're a completionist kind of player, because there are 120 different hidden stones to find along the way, and a lot of them are hidden away quite deviously. I think this is the kind of game where the proof is going to be in the pudding, because game feel goes a very long way in this skate type of thing, so I hope it feels as good as it looks to chain moves together, because that will be make or break. That is Seafrog, coming to Steam on the 19th. The 19th of the month really is a blockbuster day, huh? I'm quite curious if you're going to be picking up anything on that day, so let me know if you like the sound of Death Howl or Demon Tides, Love Eternal or Seafrog, because it might just be the biggest single indie game day of the year. And if you are still watching at this point, I know for sure that you're as into indie games as I am, and I think you might be the kind of person that would enjoy what I have to offer on Patreon. At the moment, if you join at the $3 tier or above, you get a game code as a thank you. You can choose between the vastly underrated conversational card game Signs of the Sojourner, the 2-hour archery adventure game Many Nights a Whisper, which scraped into my 2025 Games of the Year top 10, the silky smooth sci-fi racing game Phantom Spark, which is an elegant and addictive time trial game with competitive online leaderboards, or you can opt for a PS5 code for 1000 Times Resist, my 2024 Game of the Year, if you're in the EU or the US store region. On top of that, you get an invite to our wonderful Discord community, which is a quiet place to chat with like-minded indie game lovers, and you get behind the scenes content from me about how I make the videos and bonus podcasts and all kinds of stuff really. So hop on in at the $3 tier or above if you'd like a free game, or the $1 tier if you just want to throw me a tip. That's patreon.com/gaminginthewild. I will pop up a link on the screen now, and there is also one in the show notes if you want to click through and check it out after you've watched the video. And with that, let's round things out with a look at the AA and AAA games that we'll see in February 2026. The first game that I have in this section of the video is Nioh 3. It's the newest entry in the famously difficult Dark Samurai action RPG series. It has an expanded moveset, a big visual uplift, and some very imposing and impressive and creative looking new bosses actually. The previews have been red hot, and I know myself, and there is a zero chance that I would enjoy this game, but I wanted to put it on your radar anyway. And if you are on the fence about the difficulty, there is a demo on Steam if you'd like to try before you buy. That's Nioh 3. Then on the 11th, Romeo is a Dead Man releases. This is the newest release from Japanese video game director auteur Suda51, and I have a very special interest in this game because it's on my Fantasy Critic team this year, but I feel like I'm out on a bit of a limb with this one, as Suda is famous for making games that are intentionally strange. That said, this one looks pretty spectacular with cinematic action, a wild, colourful, splattercore art style, and a plot to rival Hideo Kojima's highest successes. I'm just hoping that the Metacritic score isn't below a 70, because otherwise I won't score points on my team. That's Romeo is a Dead Man. A safer bet would probably have been Yakuza 3 Kiwame and Dark Ties, which is coming out on the 12th. This is a ground-up remake of Yakuza 3 that actually adds a new story section expansion called Dark Ties. So you can relive the classic installment of Kiryu's story with refined combat apparently, and also learn about Yoshitaka Mine's rise through the Yakuza gangland. That's Yakuza 3 Kiwame and Dark Ties. And then on the 12th we get Mario Tennis Fever, and I think a lot of people are dying for news on a new Mario game to play on their shiny Switch too, but I'm afraid that this tennis game might be about as close as we get this year. I feel like Nintendo had the A-team on Donkey Kong Bonanza and we might not have a Mario in the foreseeable future, but who knows, Nintendo could pull a big surprise. But until then, we do have Mario Tennis Fever to try out. It features a story mode for solo players as well as the usual multiplayer fun. It's out on the 12th. And then finally, to round things out on this video, we get one of the events of the year in the shape of the much hyped Resident Evil Requiem. This is the first new Resident Evil game since 2024's Resident Evil Village, which I really enjoyed. I think it made my Games of the Year list that year actually. I've been playing Resident Evil since the PlayStation 1 original, back when it was a strange kind of janky, vibey haunted house mystery, and I really like the off-the-wall ghost train vibe that the modern games have now, and Requiem seems to be very much in that mold. Resident Evil fans online also seemed to be pretty over the moon when Leon from Resident Evil 4 was announced to be in this game, and maybe even as a playable character. So you can expect some more gruff, handsome grunting along the way. That's Resident Evil Requiem rounding out this month with style on the 27th. And by the way, if you don't know, I actually do a fortnightly audio podcast called Gaming in the Wild as well, and I'm going to finish off this video by bolting on a section of that podcast. If you like what you hear, you can find the Gaming in the Wild podcast on your podcast platform of choice, except for Spotify, which I am boycotting. They underpay artists, they fund AI war drones, they use AI slot music and then use their own algorithm to force it onto people. So I pulled the Gaming in the Wild podcast from there, but you can find it on YouTube. If you go to my profile page and click the podcast tab, you can find the podcast there. It's also on Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and lots of other places as well. The section that I'm going to play for you is a review of the game Cairn, and I hope that you enjoy it. So until the next one, take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now. So Cairn is a game made by The Game Bakers, a French studio. They are the makers of Fury, with an I, the boss rush game that a lot of people enjoyed, and Haven, a sci-fi couples narrative story build as an RPG that I haven't played, but I've seen it in the store a lot. I think I own it on a platform or two from it being £1 in sales, but I never got around to playing it. They're both interesting games that didn't quite hit the mainstream, but I feel like Cairn has, in a way that neither of those quite did. So I think this is a bit of a step up for them, both in terms of ambition and reception. It has a great soundtrack, which we're listening to right now, made by Martin Stieg Andersen, Gilda, and The Toxic Avenger. Martin was the audio director on this game, on Limbo, Inside, and Control, and he worked with two rising French musicians to compose this soundtrack, and it is a lovely, vibey soundtrack. I've enjoyed it a lot. The game is out on PlayStation 5 and Steam. It is deck verified. I played it on my ROG Ally X, which I'm really enjoying, by the way, my new handheld console, PC console. And the game ran super well there on both the medium and maximum power profiles. It turns out that when you flick through power profiles on a lot of games, you just get extra frames, basically. So I think it was running at like 40 frames on the medium profile. No crashes, no bugs. It ran incredibly well. There is some jank in the game, but it's not buggy. It's more just design stuff, and I'll be getting into that in the review. As for the highs and lows from the critics, it got a few 10 out of 10s. One of them came from Gaming Bible, and one of them came from Brad Galloway of So Video Games, a friend of this podcast. Both of those people who gave it a 10 out of 10 review said it is now one of their favorite games ever. So extremely high praise from people who do love this game and who find their way through it. Both of them also acknowledged that it's difficult and that it wobbles in some respects, but both loved the spectacle, the mechanics, and the story. As for the lows, there were a couple of 5 and 6 out of 10s, but this 7 from GameLiner I thought was worth reading out. They say Cairn is a bold and demanding climbing experience that constantly requires your full attention, leaving a strong impression through its freedom atmosphere and its protagonist Ava. At the same time, rough controls, technical issues, and design choices created notable friction. So it's proved to be quite a divisive game. It's hitting the heights, it's hitting some low lows, it's dividing people. Some people love it, some people can't get to grips with it. And that makes for an interesting review, I think. It makes for an interesting Metacritic page. It's 84 on Metacritic, 87 on OpenCritic, so it's done quite well for people who got it in their Fantasy Critic leagues. But as for the developers, they say reach a summit never climbed before in this survival climber. Climb anywhere and plan your route carefully, managing pitons and resources to survive the unforgiving Mount Kami. And I have to say of this one that it's a pleasingly granular rock climbing game with a surprisingly poignant story. Cairn is almost brilliant, but its central mechanics prove unreliable, too much so for it to reach the summit of its own great potential. So as you can tell from that capsule review, I'm going to come down somewhere in the middle. I really do admire what this game is trying to do. I don't think that it does it particularly well ultimately, but I admire its intent and ambition. So for the first half of this game, I was pretty sure I was going to be giving it like a 9 or a 10, and then it kind of spikes in difficulty, and the cliff that you're climbing becomes very unforgiving, And in the back half, I ended up just having a really miserable time, quite honestly. And I've ultimately bailed on the game. I don't think I am going to finish it. I've uninstalled it in a flame-out rage quit. But I do think that analysing this game with its strengths and its weaknesses could prove to be useful, interesting, hopefully, and therapeutic. So let's get into it. In this game, you play as the moody, spiky, intransigent, and famous rock climber, Ava, who is taking on an infamous peak called Kami. It's a mountain that was formerly inhabited by an indigenous people called the Troglodytes. Troglodyte is a bit of a derogatory word in English sometimes, meaning like Neanderthal or caveman. But in French, it just means cave dweller. And in modern French, it means recluse. So I think in this game, we can see it as meaning a society of reclusive cave dwellers, people who have fled society to live on a mountain on the sheer vertical cliffs in caves carved into the mountain. So you'll be passing the remains of that society on your way up the mountain, and learning about it is one of the most interesting things about the game, I think. It does become a little bit of a parable about modern society and what happens if you try to leave it, and the draw of what lies in the great below. But Ava is quite a protagonist. She's quite unlikable. She rudely brushes off concerned people who call, like her sister and her manager. And as she's climbing the cliffs, she's very vocal. She whines, whimpers, curses, screams. She punches the rock face when you fall. She is a total handful, especially for someone who's framed as an elite athlete. But she is quite an interesting protagonist too. The game doesn't glorify what she's doing at all. If anything, it kind of mines into the mindset that would make someone need to go through all of this danger to put themselves against a mountain. And so there's a little bit of interesting stuff in here about the mentality that it takes to do that kind of thing. And maybe the biggest thing that I'm bummed out about in not finishing this game is that I'm not going to get to do the climb and then get the story payoff. It's pretty clear to see that Ava's going to break down at some point, that she's actually holding it together very tightly, and is primed to pop or have some kind of major realization. I don't know what that is. I'm still deciding if I want to hold on to Cairn and try and finish it later in the year, maybe if it gets patched, or if I'm just going to watch the end on YouTube and just satisfy myself about the story conclusion. But anyway, Ava's like quite an interesting protagonist, an unusual protagonist, an unlikable protagonist, and a very vocal protagonist. So she's quite a choice from the developer, I would say. The game begins in a rock gym where you learn how to climb, and the climbing mechanics of this game are fascinating. You control each of Ava's limbs one at a time. You can either use an auto selector, which as soon as you press a button to grab, will cycle through to the next limb, which can actually feel very fluid. It's like foothold, handhold, handhold. And the 8 practice courses do a great job of showing you the different mechanics that are in play, like how the slope of the cliff affects your endurance, which does remain somewhat mysterious throughout the game actually, or bracing your arms against opposing surfaces to kind of shuffle up a chimney type structure. And I actually do really like the limb selection, handhold selection, foothold selection mechanic. It's something that feels like, if you see it on paper, it shouldn't work. It should feel clunky, it should feel rough, it should feel slow and laborious, and it kind of does, but that's intentional. Like, it makes you get into the mindset of selecting your next handhold in a way that almost no other video game does. It is a far cry from the automated climbing that we see in Sony games, and even in a game like Jusant, which was a little more automated and less mechanical and less laborious than Cairn. So they really have done something interesting here. They've explored the minutiae and the moment-to-moment activity of climbing in a way that I have not quite experienced in a game before. It isn't all roses though. I think sometimes the game seems to push the mechanics past what they can handle. I think that when there are enough handholds around you, then it works perfectly well. But as the game thins out the opportunities to climb easily, the mechanics are stretched in a way that is to the detriment of this game. For example, it's not immediately visibly apparent when Ava has a firm handhold or a weak handhold, and it makes a huge difference to climbing. Sometimes you can grab something that looks cosmetically like a firm handhold, and again, and another foothold and another foothold, find that suddenly all of Ava's limbs start to shake. The color will bleed out of the screen. Her breathing will become ragged. It will zoom in, and then within a few seconds, she has fallen. If it's a small fall, you may lose some health from landing on the ground or dangling from a rope and banging into the cliffside. If it's a big fall, you will die and be reset to your save file. Either way, a fall is kind of very damaging. You will lose resources that you've wasted trying to keep Ava, fed, watered, and full of energy. And you will have to burn through some of the valuable resources you have in your backpack. So losing progress can be very punishing in this game. And something about the difficulty ramping of the game means that the weaknesses of the climbing system are spotlighted in a very unflattering light the further that you get up the mountain. So whilst the basic limb selection and grabbing mechanics work very well, I think that they come apart a little as the game goes on. And the lack of clear visual feedback on whether or not she is firmly anchored to a spot, which if you were a climber you would know from feeling it, but as a player we are guessing from what we can see, and the game makes us guess a little too much, which makes me feel helpless as a player, which makes me feel like there is some unfairness when I feel like I've done everything right based on what I'm looking at, but the feedback from the game is that I've done everything wrong and then I fall. And helplessness leads to frustration, in my case at least, and in some of the reviewers' cases as well, from what I read earlier. So that's a really, really deep flaw in this game, sadly. And I feel like despite all of its strengths, it did really damage my enthusiasm to see the game through. But there are other mechanics here too. The game has survival mechanics. You have to manage Ava's food, water, health, and energy. You will find stuff on your way up Kami. You'll find water springs where you can fill all your bottles. You'll find abandoned backpacks with supplies, medication. You'll find things growing. You'll find berries, you'll find leaves and so forth, which you can brew into tea. You can camp, and when you're camping, you can sleep, cook, tape up Ava's fingers. You need to tape the fingers. It's a really cool tactile mechanic that makes you feel like you're on a climb. You can repair your equipment. Your pitons will damage if you don't place them correctly, and can be repaired. And all of this is cool. It's diverting, and being in the tent with Ava at rest spots added to the sense of a journey. I really enjoyed feeling like I was with her on this climb, and the tent sequences really did that. She sleeps, she reads, she does push-ups. You cook, and then you can either choose to eat what you've made and drink what you've made, or put it in your backpack for later. I will say that the survival mechanics are good in principle, but if you are having a bad time, they can send you into a negative tailspin. Like if you're climbing and you've planted some pitons, but you fall a couple times and have to repeat sections, Ava's thirst is going up, her hunger is going up, you're going to have to burn through your resources, and that feels bad. It's like being punished. On top of the fall, you're being punished again by the resource system. And you can actually toggle survival off in the assist menu, which negates the need for collecting things for cooking. And that's like a nuclear option, I would say. I don't know many people who have played this game without toggling off survival at some point, which I think points to it being flawed. It would be better if it was navigable or integrated in a way that it was more approachable, but it's not quite working here. And I think the assist toggle to turn it off completely is an admission of that from the developer. And speaking of assists, there is also an assist that tries to paper over the cracks in the climbing system that I've described. You can toggle on a sort of video gamey visual feedback system where if you grab a rock and it's a firm handhold, a big square will appear over the hand that you've just placed, and with your feet and so forth. So you can see if you are stably anchored onto the surface, but at the cost of it suddenly appearing very, very video gamey. And this is interesting to me, because I'm glad that those assists are there, for sure. Like, they've enabled a lot of people to experience the game that may have bailed on it otherwise. But at the same time, I feel like they are admissions of failures in the core systems of the game that actually provide a manageable but unsatisfying version of the game. It's a bit like invincibility in Tunic or Celeste. Like, yes, you can finish the game by being invincible, but no, it won't feel good. It will feel horrible. And so I think like assist options are great. I love to see them there, but the way that they've been implemented here feels like the game telling on itself a little bit. It seems like a lot of band-aids are required to actually play this game. And that points to me to some broken base gameplay that perhaps needed to be addressed or reworked. If those assists could have been more cleverly integrated into the base gameplay, like if there was a visual feedback system that didn't need a huge UI or HUD, but did allow the player to get more of a feel for how well anchored Ava is onto the wall, then that could have really gone a long way in making this game reach its potential. So I think that the game has problems that were addressed with these nuclear option assist band-aids, but are so fundamental that they should perhaps have been addressed in a more holistic fashion when looking at the core design of the game. And I feel kind of sad about saying this stuff because I think it's a bit of a tragedy that that I couldn't click with Cairn. I was really looking forward to the game. I loved the demo. I rinsed the demo. And for the first sort of 6-7 hours of the game, I was having a wonderful time. The game does some wonderful things. It provides a lot of wonderful moments. The story is more poignant than I expected. And so it was a big surprise to me that about halfway up the mountain, I just hit a wall where the mechanics were not singing in harmony. Suddenly everything was in disharmony. I can't quite get the grip system to work. Even with the assist turned on, I'm somehow not managing it. Even with survival turned off, I'm somehow not managing it. And I banged my head against one particular section of the game for, hours, over 3 sessions. Rage quit, uninstalled the game, calmed down, reinstalled it, and then the same happened again. And in the end, I've just kind of bailed on the game. I think my headcanon is that sadly Ava just didn't make it. Like her grip wasn't strong enough, her will wasn't strong enough, her equipment failed her, her hold failed her in the way that the game's mechanics failed me. And so I guess like in my headcanon, Ava didn't make it. But to run through some of the good things and bad things about Cairn, on the good side, the scenario is very interesting. I was very taken with Kami, the troglodyte culture, the collapsed tourism industry that you're climbing through, the detritus of other climbers that have tried this ahead of you. Some made it, some didn't, and you will be passing all of that on your way up. I especially liked hearing about how the climbers who stream up Mount Kami had affected the indigenous culture. It's a little bit about tourism in that respect, even if it's a very athletic form of tourism. I like the pacing of the game. You have a big cliff, then you have a ledge where you can camp, look back at where you've climbed and feel that satisfaction of progress. The limb control system is cool. It works better than it should. It feels pretty smooth. Most of the time I used the automatic limb selection unless it's started selecting limbs that I didn't want, and then I had to flip to manual, but even that you can do with the push of a button. So the automatic limb selection was cool. The climbing mechanic was cool. And if you get into a rhythm, and there's plenty of handholds for you and everything's going well, it can feel really nice. It can feel really, really satisfying. I think that Kami as a whole might be one of the most dramatic and memorable mountains in all of video games. I think the title was previously held by Mount Hebra in the modern Zelda games. And I think that the challenge and the hostility and the drama and the vistas and the culture of this mountain maybe make it the best of all. The downsides, though, I've been through in detail already. I feel that the endurance system is a bit busted. You can feel and look stable and have no visual indication that anything is wrong at all. And then 5 seconds later, you've fallen. I found this to make me feel helpless, and I found it to feel unfair. And helplessness and a feeling of it being unfair is exactly the setup for frustration and rage quits. I found the survival mechanics to be punishing. It punishes failure. It puts you into a tailspin. And that's not what you need. You don't need double punishment for a fall, but that's what the game has. And to be honest, I found Ava to be something of an overbearing character. She was very, very vocal. And honestly, I saw Jacob Geller talking about this game on MinMax, and he said that Ava's screams, her guttural, harsh, long screams when she falls, were cathartic for him. But to me, it just sort of nailed the frustration I was feeling into me. And I found myself very irritated by Ava. I am bummed that I don't get to see her come to Jesus moment on the mountain. I assume that she will have one, but maybe I will either finish the game later if it's patched into a more playable form for me personally, or I'll watch it on YouTube if we get to the end of the year and I'm just, curious to see what happens. And I think that if you combine the 3 flaws that I have outlined, the vocal protagonist who got on my nerves, the poorly integrated survival mechanics, and the design issues around endurance and climbing, that proved to be a deal breaker for me, even on a game that I was really rooting for and really wanted to play. So to round things out, I think in the end I'm quite torn on how to talk about the game. I understand that more patient players than me who persist or come to peace with the slightly janky nature of the climbing are the 10 out of 10 people, and this game deserves all of the 10 out of 10s it's getting. People who have played it and felt really passionately about it are many. But I also understand the 5 out of 10 critics who say it's too flawed to play, because I found that to be the case. I do feel that it's maybe one of the best representations of climbing in all of video games. I also feel that as a game, it was borderline unplayable to me after about halfway up the mountain, when I just hit that wall of not being able to navigate, the lack of handholds, even with assists on. So there we go. Both of those are valid, I think. The 10s and the 5s are valid. I find myself caught somewhere in the middle. I admire its ambition. I don't like its execution. So for me, it's like a 6.5, a 7 out of 10, which is a real shame. It's a very interesting and ambitious game, but that is where I ended with Cairn. And that is also where I end this video. So if you enjoyed it, please give it a like, sub to the channel for more like this. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one.